not for Kevin, but it ended up being for both of us. So we had this little art space, tiny little closet, but it had shelves in it and a little space where you could sit on a stool, and then there was like a desk built into the wall so that we could actually like do art on it. And that was our setup, and that was how we started spending most of our time at first. Writing music, we were writing songs, we were making art. It was in those processes that I started to really recognize how controlling he was, and I just let it happen. Just let him be that way. And so within the matter of even just a couple months, let's say, okay, so within like the first 4 months that I was there, it got to the point where like I had a set list of chores every day that was required of me, including Bible reading and writing songs and making art, these other chores like laundry and stuff like that. Bike riding. We got bikes. Or he had bikes. I think we got bikes. Real cheap somewhere. And so there's like these physical things and these creative things and these mental religious things, or theological things. Part of it was like he started pretty quickly with this concept that he wanted to develop a self-sustaining engine. Uh, uh, what's the word? Like an engine that just keeps running forever. And so that's what he was doing. And I was helping with those theories. He would show me, the diagrams that he had come up with and different things, and he would ask me. Yeah, everything was like a test. Everything was like a quiz. He kept himself above me psychologically, and I kept myself below him emotionally, and that was also part of the rules. But he was also like pretty open about the fact that he was feeding me information so that I could process it, and then he could pull out of it what he needed to. Um, and that's just what I became for him. Um, at the same time, we had been engaging with one another sexually, and that was always a point of frustration for him. I wanted to be sexually engaged. He would want to whenever he randomly would feel sexual. But then immediately after having sex with me, or even sometimes during sex with me, would get extremely frustrated. The sex started becoming extremely controlling. He didn't like that I enjoyed it. He didn't want me to enjoy it. When I enjoyed it, it would make him come too fast, So like, I don't mean to be explicit, but like, he didn't like that. It felt controlling to him, and I wasn't supposed to be the one in control. He started becoming very adamant about men being in control and women being submissive. But at the same time, his entire concept was that we were supposed to be equals. And so he was training me how to be an equal through submission while he was supposed to be in control. And like the way it was supposed to work was that like my given quality was to be independent, and his given quality was to be subversive. And through each other and our partnership, we were supposed to learn, he was supposed to be learning how to become more commanding and confident, and I was supposed to be learning how to become more humble and submissive. And that was where we would find our equality. So then we had like a set list of rules that was being developed over time as to how I was to behave in order to reach that goal. The issue really was just that, like, he treated everything as if he already had all of the answers, and I was the rebellious idiot that was frustrating things, you know? Um, so, yes, I mean, the sex got to a point where, like, it would only happen super randomly when I was like completely removed from my own sexuality, when I was like doing certain chores or doing certain things that he had requested of me and was like very involved in, that was when he would be like, okay, now we're going to do it. And then it was basically like I couldn't talk, I couldn't move. I had to just take it. And I, even trying to do that, was still bad at it. Um, he could still tell that I enjoyed it at times, and that he would stop and he would scold me and berate me about it and degrade me in order to bring me down, because I wasn't supposed to be that way. And he was trying to, it was the Jezebel spirit, and he was trying to break that. Um, it got to the point where we stopped having sex, and he just berated me all the time. We stopped talking. He put me on uh, like a grounding where I had to be silent. I wasn't allowed to talk unless asked a question specifically and given the command to communicate. His mom started noticing that there was something wrong in that way, that I was acting different, and tried to ask me about it, and I couldn't give her an answer. And Kevin pretty much just took control of all of it, It was like, nope, she agrees to this. This is what we're doing. This is part of our process. Leave her alone. So it was about 2 months that I couldn't talk, unless, you know, unless he allowed it. And during that time, he started having me watch these movies and take notes on them. And he wanted me to compile a theory of everything based on the series of movies that he had me watch. And he wanted me to compile them all together and come up with a theory of everything. Now, that was an exploitation of my already sensitive state, because it was something that I had already kind of done naturally. Um, I watched The Truman Show when I was like 8 years old, and it really fucked me up. And ever since watching that, I had this weird thing that I would do anyways, where like I felt like everything was a movie, and I felt like everything was like scripted around me somehow. But I managed it pretty well. And so when he had me start doing this homework essentially, or these chores, like, it came naturally to me. But it also like really enhanced that delusion. So he had me watch the Matrix series, the X-Men series, and Ex Machina, however you pronounce it. Um, there were other movies that we watched that also added into it, but those were the main ones. And I had to come up with a theory of everything based on those things. The Matrix series, obviously, The Matrix, right? Talking all about The Matrix. The entire series gets really deep, because it gets into like Zion and shit, and like the two different worlds that we're constantly living in. It was dissociating me. The X-Men series was about how essentially there is two different realms that we live in, but they're on top of each other and in the same world. And there's certain individuals that have within their DNA a superpower that has to be triggered in order for them to have access to it. And if you've ever watched the X-Men series, including Deadpool. It was right around the time Deadpool came out, and that was part of the series, where Ajax shows how, and Kevin considered himself like Ajax, and myself like Deadpool. Where like the point was that he was conducting a psyop to trigger my traumas specifically under his control in order to enhance or pull out a very specific superpower. But with all the X-Men, they all undergo some sort of severe trauma that enacts their superpowers. And Ex Machina is about an android that was built and given sentience in order to be observed so that they could research the sentience of an AI, but she ends up escaping. So, like, all of this went into my delusion, right? All of this went into why I ended up so fucked up after I got out. I started, now on top of it, okay, so all of that was happening. So I'm aware that that's what he's doing. He's letting me know that that's what he's doing, and I'm just accepting it. And he keeps telling me like what an idiot I am for that. But at the same time, he's telling me that I have to be stupid in order to receive it, and that's the point. And like, I just have to trust him, and I don't, but I do. And, so like, this is how he's engaging with me. The only thing I'm talking about at this time, the only thing I'm able to talk about at this time is these theories that he's having me conduct and come up with. And at the same time, he's constantly calling me a fat whore and a bitch for everything, but particularly we had been having the process of like me going out on bike rides and us going to the store together once a week and different stuff like that. But he started getting too frustrated because like the more entrapped I felt, the more I subconsciously was seeking out escape in different ways. And what that looked like was like when we were out, he had trained me to keep my head down and to walk behind him. But I would look up and see people. And anytime that I made eye contact specifically with a man, he would see the man looking at me and would see the man like either looking at me with lust or looking at me with pity and then looking at him with anger. Because like it was obvious that he was keeping me submissive, and people were responding just naturally, just energetically, like they didn't like that. And he didn't like that I was making that space for people to receive things that way energetically. So that started to become an issue. And like, this is a big thing for him because he was like, souls speak to each other, like without having to say a word. Like, he's like, pay attention, because like you say something or you'll even just think something and somebody across the room will like cough or sneeze, and that's because they're picking up on that shit and like they're receiving your transference. And like, it's very important that you control your transference, your energy transference. I'm turning on this other light. It's continuing to get too dark. So, after being in the fucking mental ward a couple times, like I can recognize that is a pretty common concept in schizophrenia. What's crazy about schizophrenia that I learned is that you can actually become temporarily delusional in the same sort of way when you are given to those things. If you actually like believe somebody when they're telling you about their delusions. Like their delusions can lead you to believe them too, right? I'm putting it this way. Things are going to get fucking really deep at some point. Not in this video, but at a different time, I'll explain this stuff in a different way and open up that box. But I was receiving all of these things, and I was abiding by these standards as best as I could to avoid the abuse, you know. But like I said, at this time, like because of the attention I would get, even with my head down and walking behind him and not talking to anybody and not giving anybody any energy transference, I was still triggering energy transference from people. He literally could not take me out in public without men trying to give me attention, and that was an issue. So I stopped being allowed to go out in public, and he was extremely frustrated with me during that time, to the point that like we stopped engaging in sex at all. We stopped engaging in communication outside of, you know, me talking about these theories and stuff. That's when I started to notice, well, there were several times that I thought I was dreaming it. I thought I was dreaming it, and I wouldn't really remember when I woke up. So I didn't notice until I came to one time. I'd woken up and I came to and I felt fucked up, but I like was more conscious than I had been other times. And I realized, like, I kind of like opened my eyes, but only a tiny bit. I like was looking through my eyelashes, you know what I mean? Like I wasn't letting my eyes open. I was still acting like I was asleep. And he was having sex with me in my sleep. And I like kept falling in and out of consciousness, but was fighting it in order to like watch him. And I realized as I was watching him that this was what he was doing. He was drugging me somehow and having sex with me in my sleep. And that was the only way he could have sex with me without me having anything to do with it. You know what I mean? Like he didn't want me to be engaged. So he just trumped all of that. And I felt like I was drugged, but I didn't fully know it until a few years later, or like maybe 3 years later or so, 2 years or 3 years later, when I was drugged and raped at this festival. And I knew as soon as it hit, as soon as the drug hit, I knew exactly what it was. I had felt that before. I knew what was happening. And at that point I realized like, okay, this is what that dude was doing. But at the time I was fucked up. I was really fucked up and I didn't know what to do. And I now at this point, like, you know, like I'd come to enough and watched it happen, but I didn't know what to do about it. I didn't recognize it at the time as rape. I recognized it as completely non-consensual, especially because he was berating me during the day and calling me a slut just for men noticing me in public while I was actively doing everything I could to not let that happen. But then he was still using me that way. And I remember being mad about that and frustrated with him about it. I mean, like at this time, like, I mean, even very shortly within the time that I'd been there, it was like a couple months, maybe 3 to 4 months that I'd been there, that, right when this started happening, you know, like him being away with me, like not letting me be away in public. And that slowly just kept progressing to this point. It started with my clothing, him not being comfortable with the way that I dressed. So I was only allowed, first it started where I wasn't allowed to wear black pretty much all the clothes I had at the time were black. And I was only allowed to wear dark blue because black is voiding to a point where it is asking for attention, but negative attention, where dark blue is more subtle and more receiving. And he was like, if you have to wear dark clothes, then you can only wear dark blue clothes. So I had to like get new clothes. And that wasn't sufficient. That turned into me just wearing his clothes. So I had a pair of khakis. I wore my own pants, but he had me wear his belt and his t-shirts, and I had to tuck them in and wear the belt. He wanted me to wear tennis shoes, but I insisted upon wearing my boots, and he didn't like that I just wore the same pair of boots every day. But he allowed it. They were black, and he didn't like it, but it was like the one, like those became my security blanket. Because he allowed me to have that. And that was like the one thing that he was like, okay, that's what you can do. Then you can always wear that one pair of boots. They were very, very basic, slip-on black, like not velvet, but yeah, like patent leather. What are they? Suede. Thank you. Suede boots, black suede boots that were very basic. And I had a bandana wrapped around my ankle. It was my only form of self-expression, and he allowed it. I wasn't allowed to wear makeup. Had to grow my hair out. Like I at the time had been like cutting and dyeing my hair and stuff, and I had to grow my hair out, which is fine. I mean, I was already growing my hair out, but like he was just very, he wanted me very natural and very modest. And he would take me to Kohl's and show me the women in the Kohl's like pictures, like the ads or whatever, where they had like, their shirts tucked in, and they'd be wearing like button down shirts, and they'd look very like they'd have, their khakis or their pleated pants, and their cropped hair, and like they looked very preppy, basic. And that's what he wanted. But he also like was like weird about like my body shape. Like he found me attractive at first, and then found out through me that breasts and hips and big asses and stuff like that are fat. There's muscle, but they're also like, especially like having big breasts, like that's just fat. That's just extra fat. And when he found that out, it like made him so grossed out. Like he's like, oh, you're fat. And then he just like kept on that about how fat I was, because I have big hips and I have a big ass and I have big tits. And like, that's, he was like, I want you to look like athletic. So he was very particular about me being athletic and like being very active. And he was like, he told me at one point that he wanted me to start punching walls, because he was like, I want your knuckles to get so thick that you can climb a mountain on them, which was funny. And he was funny. He was funny sometimes, but it was like always insane. And yeah, I was very particular about my body, the way that I dressed, all of those things, just the way I carried myself. He wanted me very meek and very humble and very, at the same time though, those things benefited me. I was lazy. I was sloppy. I was a slob. I didn't know how to clean things properly. I didn't take proper care of myself. So I started like eating. The diet I had while I was there was like the best diet you could ask for. It was super, super healthy, very, very basic, super healthy. I was drinking lots of water. I was taking care of myself in all of these ways because he insisted upon it. I was very modest, and like all of those things, like I still carry so much of that all with me. There's a lot that I still act in rebellion against, but like I'm getting over that too, to the point where I can just embrace myself fully. It's taken a long time. Sorry. It's taken a long time because like it was just a lot. It's just a lot. And like it got to the point where I don't know how long this video is going to last. So I'm trying to like kind of rush through it a little bit, but like he had me watch those series of movies and write the theory of everything, and that turned into him actively trying to develop my superpowers. So like he was literally having like he's putting me through deprivation in order to teach me how to see through walls and how to read people's minds. I wanted to practice levitation, but he wanted me to learn these basics first before we got to that point. And I did get to the point now that I don't know what to think or say about these things, because I literally did get to the point where like he was testing me and I was able to see through walls. I was able to read people's minds. I don't know. It was weird. That's like a whole nother story. That's a whole nother thing to get into. Um, but yeah, I guess when it was, I mean, oh, and things got real bad between us too. Like I started to have a psychotic break as things got really deeply, and actually it was after I realized he was raping me. That's when I started to get, I just started to struggle. I started to have a break. I started cutting myself again, which I did when I was a teenager, but hadn't done as an adult. And I was just so trapped feeling. I just started cutting myself. I was cutting my legs so that nobody would see it. But he caught me doing it. And I was fucked up. We started fighting. It got to the point where like he would like I was threatening to like stab him. I was like, I'm gonna find something and stab you. Like, leave me alone. And I started sleeping in the closet downstairs, the little art closet. Um, I slept in there for a few months too. Like it was a few months. I was there for 11 months total. And yeah, he just started harassing me because I started fighting against him. And as soon as I started fighting against him, he was like, whoa, okay, I don't actually have control over this woman. Like, so things got intense pretty quick. There was one point where like I had never hit anybody ever. I never wanted to. The idea of hitting somebody physically, trying to hurt somebody, hurt me. I didn't like it, but like I remember just looking at his fucking face and like as he was just yelling at me all the time about all this shit and snapping at me about all this shit and being so controlling, and I was like, I'm gonna fucking just punch the shit out of you. And he knew that I felt that way. And so there was one time that he was like egging me on, like trying to get me to do it. And he just kept like saying all this shit and like poking me, like pushing me. And I was like, you like fucking leave me alone. Like, you better leave me alone. And I was like trying to run away from him and he just kept following me and stuff. And then he got up in my face and had his face literally pressed against my face and he was yelling at me. And I remember feeling his spit on my face as his face was pressed against mine and looking at his eyes turn into one eye, you know, when you're that close to somebody. And I was just looking at him like, you look so fucking stupid right now. Just feeling his face pressed against mine. And his dad came upstairs. His dad had been downstairs and his dad came upstairs because he heard us yelling. I was like, what the fuck is happening? Because he saw us standing there like that. And then he was like, you guys got to get out of here if you're going to be like that. And then his dad ended up going back downstairs and Kevin started up again. Started like looking at me and like saying some shit. And I just wound up and I went to punch him. But I remember like the second that I went to being like, oh, I don't actually want to do this. So instead of hitting him like with all the strength that I wanted to, I like pillow pawed him, you know, like I like didn't let any power go into it. And I kind of just like pushed his face. And then he just got this smirk on his face and grabbed me by my ponytail, grabbed me by my hair, and then dragged me out of the fucking house because he didn't want his dad coming back up and yelling at us. Dragged me out of the house. And he was a couple inches shorter than me. And I was like, you know, I was bigger because I was fat and then I'd gotten like pretty fit, but like was bigger than him. I was bigger than him. And he dragged me out of that house like I was a fucking rag doll, like it was nothing. And at that point I was like, yeah, I'm not going to be able to overpower a man like this. Like, men are strong. And I'm not I'm not strong enough to fight a man. So I fell back into submission. Things were just crazy. And things were crazy. And like there was like I'd mentioned in the other, like the time that we did shrooms was like part of the psyop. Like he was trying to break me down psychologically. So we took shrooms, which I had never wanted to do. I never wanted to do any sort of anything that took me out of my own mind. I didn't even like getting drunk. Like I smoked pot and that was it. I never wanted to do something that made me not feel like myself. But again, I didn't care about myself at the time and I had given myself to him completely. So we took these shrooms and he put on the movie Up, which I ended up loving. That I ended up having an amazing trip, feeling really good about myself, getting super confident, learned a bunch of things about myself that I wouldn't have otherwise. He hated all of that. That was not the plan. The plan was that as soon as I started tripping, he thought that I'd be in such a sensitive state that the first couple minutes of Up were like the people are kids and then they end up falling in love and then they end up making these plans to like spend their whole lives together